Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on what's new in QuickBooks 2021 for QuickBooks Desktop. We're going to be talking about all the new features for Pro, Premier, and Enterprise solutions. A lot of this is going to be for Pro and Premier. There are going to be a couple of things we'll talk about that are Enterprise exclusive there towards the end, mostly about advanced inventory features being improved. There is one pretty big improvement in terms of data level permissions, but we'll eventually get to that. Now I'm gonna break up this class into two parts. We're gonna have a Pro and Premier section. That's gonna be the people who use Pro and Premier. And then after that, we'll then move into the Enterprise exclusive features. Won't be a whole lot there. It's actually a pretty big year for Pro and Premier. Lots of good stuff to talk about. So what I'm going to do is start up this PowerPoint. Now first, we're going to talk about automation. So in the past, whenever customers, you had to do it by clicking statements, choosing the parameters that you want QuickBooks to send out statements, and then emailing them or print process can now be automated. So if you want to send out customer statements based on a variety of criteria, based upon whether or not they have an open balance or whether or not you just want to send them a summary of charges, you can absolutely do that. You just set up the automation process, and we'll talk about that first. Then we'll talk about customized payment receipts. In the past, whenever you as a repayment type transaction, there was no way to whenever we print them out or email them. Well, there is now. So we'll talk about how that's done. We'll also talk about improved PDF and attachment preview. If you ever email out invoices and attachments to clients from within QuickBooks, it can sometimes be hard for you to see a preview of that PDF and of those attachments. Now the workflow is improved. You can actually do it directly through the email screen, so you'll see that. There are online banking using bank feeds. There is a new version of bank feeds that you can turn on. The older two versions are still available. The Express View is still there. The old Register View is still there, but there's a new one. It's called the Advanced View. Though to be honest, I think it's actually a little bit less advanced. We'll also talk about the brand new QuickBooks Desktop mobile app, which has just been released. I think it came out 2 months or so ago, whenever 2021 was released. For now, the mobile app, all it can do is record expenses. So if you have a receipt and you want to take a picture of that receipt and upload it to your company file, you can do it. And that's what that's going to be used for. Hopefully they'll expand it over time and add some more features, but that's good enough for a lot of people because if you're ever out in the field and you need to take a picture, or even if you're in the office and you've got a whole lot of receipts that you need to scan really quickly, you can probably do a little bit faster with your phone or with the tablet. So I'll show you how that can be done. We'll also talk about, and this is where we get into Enterprise down here towards the bottom. We'll talk about data level permissions and basically how you can divide up your customers and your vendors into different groups and then assign different users so that they can only interact with that particular group. So if you assign sales reps to customers, or if you want to assign a sales rep to a particular region for your customers, you can absolutely do that. And I'll show you how you can build those groups. You can also build vendor groups. So the main application that most people are going to be using this for are going to be the customer groups. But if you want to set up different purchasers for different vendors, you can do that too. We'll also talk about some advanced inventory improvements. Again, that's for Enterprise only. Advanced inventory is an Enterprise add-on feature. Some of you may be using it, so we'll talk about a couple of those. But those are going to be pretty small. It's mostly just going to be a couple of little toggles that they've added to make sure that you don't make a mistake here or there. Now, we are recording this, by the way, so all of you are going to get a recording of this no matter how long you stay. And also anybody who registered for this class is going to get a recording too. So you can watch it anytime you want to, you can review it. And one thing I want to point out at the top of this class is that, we make classes like this, What's New in QuickBooks 2021, at least partly available because we don't want you to go out and buy a new version of QuickBooks unless it has a feature out there in it that is going to improve things for you, right? Otherwise, you're spending money that you don't need to spend. And that's kind of what I want to say right up front, is that you don't have to upgrade every year. Some of you might be on a subscription plan for Pro or Premier, which means that you just pay monthly or yearly for that subscription plan. And if that's the case, you automatically get that new version. So you can go and contact Intuit if they haven't contacted you already to get a code and to be able to download the newest version of QuickBooks. But if you're not on one of those subscription plans, the reason why you're in this class might be, should I even upgrade? Is it worth it to pay that extra $300 or $600 to upgrade to 2021? Well, we'll see, because you'll get all of the improvements that have happened between whatever year version you're using and 2021. So you won't just get the things I'm talking about right here. If you bought QuickBooks in 2015, you'll get everything that was improved between 2016 and today. So could be quite a lot if that's the case. So we're just talking about 2021 today, lots of stuff to cover. So let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to talk about automated customer statements right up at the front. Now, with automated customer statements, I'm just going to go ahead and open up QuickBooks here. So statements have been in QuickBooks for a long time. Whenever you open up statements, basically this is a way for you to communicate to customers all of the transactions that have happened with them over a period of time. Now, the parameters that you choose are going to dictate what ends up on that statement, whether you want them to just see the transactions that are open, whether you want to show them every transaction that has happened, period, whether you want to just show them the transactions that have affected their balance. Those are all options when we're talking about statements, and we talk about statements pretty extensively in Mastering QuickBooks Desktop Level 1. So if you want to check that out at any time, you can. Really what this does, and this isn't a new type of statement, it doesn't necessarily improve the layout or how statements are built. All this is going to do is automate the process of sending them. So instead of having to click on statements, fill out all of these details, and then click print or email, instead you just actually set up parameters whereby QuickBooks will automatically generate those statements and send them out for you. So it's pretty easy to set this up. Click on option for go to payment reminders. Now, what's interesting about this is that Intuit, in building this feature, has essentially expanded a feature that they introduced last year. Last year, they introduced a feature that was all about payment reminders that would be automatically sent out to customers. It was really cool, works really well. Now, they have basically made the decision to link statements with that similar process. Now, statements aren't always about letting customers know about payments that are due. Statements could be something that you want to be sent out yearly to let customers or donors know about all of the donations that they've sent you throughout the year, right? That's a thing that a nonprofit would do. It could be that you're running a school and you want to send out monthly statements to let the parents know about tuition charges and the payments that they've made. They might not even owe any money, right? So there is a bit of a conflation there, that this is something that is about payment reminders, but these statements can be sent out for any variety of different issues. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this button. Now we're going to be brought into the schedule payment reminders window. Remember, we're not really reminding people about payments. This is something that is involving statements specifically. Now in this window, we basically set up a new schedule. This is our new schedule for statements. And essentially, we have to choose which customers we want to send these statements off to. You're basically able to create customer groups, and that dictates who's going to receive a statement and who's not. So I'm just going to say that we're going to create a customer group that involves all of our customers. So I'll put in all customers. That's what we're going to name this particular group, but you can narrow it down to whatever you like. Click next. And then we're going to look for fields and values. This is like a really quick way for QuickBooks to search through all of your customers to try to find the ones that you think this will pertain to. So if you want to just send these to a particular customer type, or people with just a particular sales rep or credit limit, credit balance, or open balance, that sort of thing, you absolutely can. I'm just going to say status equals active. That'll mean that this is going to be sent out to every active customer. So if a customer has been marked as inactive, they're not going to receive any statements, but we're going to send out a statement to everybody who doesn't fall into that category. We'll add that onto here, and basically what QuickBooks is going to do is it's going to look for anything that we've set up a parameter for. And you can set up multiple parameters up here. By the way, this is a window that you'll see a little bit later on as well, because it's very similar to what's used whenever you're setting up different data level permissions in Enterprise. We'll get to that in a bit. Now, once you've set up the parameters and click next, QuickBooks is going to go and search for all of the customers that fit that particular criteria. So here we've got all of our customers. Now, this works really well if you're setting up a statement to be sent out for all of your donors. So if you're running a nonprofit and you want to send out a statement to every donor, well, this is all of our active donors, right? So this is going to do it for us. And also, what's more, automatically add new or remove existing customers based on fields and values selected in this group. So whenever we add more customers as time goes by, they'll get added on to this. Now, this works really well for a nonprofit because they're going to want to send out that statement to every single donor, right? But what if we only want to send out statements to customers who have an open balance? Well, that's easy to figure out too, because right here, if I click my drop-down arrow and choose a field instead to open balance, and then we'll say, let's say greater than penny. Click add. So now what we're doing is we're setting up a parameter for QuickBooks to look for every customer that has an open balance greater than a penny. And when I click next, it's going to find all those people, and it's automatically going to add, new, or remove these customers based on the fields and values selected in this group. So right now I'm setting up this group, and it includes Alamo Foundation because they have a balance, and they're going to be included in this statement, this automated statement. But if they pay their balance between the first automated statement schedule and the second, QuickBooks will remove them from this group. So they won't get that second automated statement, or third or fourth or fifth, or however often we set them up for. So from this point, once we set this up, QuickBooks is going to just update this list for us, and then it'll automatically send out those statements for us. So we've set up our customer group right here. I should have probably named it something other than all customers. I should have named it customers with open balance or something like that. But we've got our reminder here. I'm going to go ahead and edit that payment group. Oh, yeah, let's edit it. I want to name it customers with open balances. That'll work better. Go. Perfect. All right. That looks a little bit better. So now we're going to set up the statements that are going to be sent out. We're going to add a reminder here. So this is the parameters that we want for the statements that get sent out. Statement day. So we can enter a day of every month, or you can also set this up for every quarter or every week. So what I'll do is I'll just say, we want this to be sent out on the 1st of every month. Works for me. What should be the statement period? So what do we want to report on? Do we want to report on the previous month? In this case, if a customer has a balance, we probably want to send them a statement that shows them all of the things that are currently open. So instead of choosing a statement period, we choose the second option, generate a statement for open transactions. But you could also choose overdue instead if you just want to show them the overdue ones. Could be though that they're not even overdue on them, that you just want to remind them that they're there. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose that. But also, if you want to get super specific, you can also choose that they only receive overdue notifications if it's over a certain day. So if they get a grace period or something like that, it's absolutely optional. But statement period works really well if you want to give people a summary of charges and transactions over a period of time every now and then. So we'll just say open transactions. What invoice details do we want to include? Now, due date, I think, is pretty fair. Let's include that because there might be some invoices that are in there. After all, we are sending open transactions, which involves invoices and credit memos. Do we want to include the memo that's on the invoice? Sure, let's do that, or the credit memo. And also item details. Now, this one is where it gets a little bit trickier because the item details are the specific products and services that were included on the invoice or on the credit memo, whatever happens to be included on the statement. So that's a big open question. Usually people will leave that unchecked just because it ends up creating very large statements. And naturally, if the person wants to look up the details, they can probably look at the invoice that you sent to them, but you could choose to include it too if you wanted to. Now, how would you want your statement to look like? Now, this is where you pick out the statement templates. So if you have your own particular template that you've created, you can choose it from either one of these lists. Now, we also have the option to generate a separate statement for each customer or job, for each job, I should say. It says each customer job, but it really means individual jobs. So if you have a customer who has 5 jobs and they each have different balances, checking this box will give them a statement for each individual job. A lot of people will just want them to be combined onto a single statement for that customer, but you could break them up if you wanted to. We click OK. That's it. From this point forward, QuickBooks will generate a list of statements that need to be created for those customers, and it'll update it over time based on when they pay, and or if you have any new customers who have an open balance, it'll put them onto that list. So pretty simple. Now, what happens from this point forward is whenever this happens on the 1st of every month, you're going to get a pop-up window. It'll pop up right here on the home page, and it'll tell you that you have customers that need to have those notifications sent to them. And all you need to do from that point forward is go up here to Customers, Payment Reminders, and it's this top option, Review and Send Payment Reminders. And once you open up this window, it'll list all of the people that fit the parameter, whether it's a payment reminder or whether it's a statement. So these are all the statements right here. You can actually see that it's got the statement. This is the statement that it'll attach. This is the email. Of course, the email is going to be a little bit different based upon the customer because it changes their name right there, and you can send them automatically right through this window. Now, QuickBooks isn't going to do this necessarily for you. You still have to open up this window. You still have to make sure that the right ones are checked. You still have to click Send Now, but it's still easier than going through and finding every single person that fits these parameters. So definitely a time saver. So that's automated statements. Pretty cool feature that they've added. Definitely something you should take advantage of if you have customers that you need to list out the charges and transactions that have happened over time. Now, next, I want to talk about, and this isn't going to take very long, this is going to be about customizing payment receipts. So historically, sales receipts could always be edited, and you could always change the formatting on them. They have different templates. So we're not talking about sales receipts. That's been in QuickBooks for a long time. You can also, of course, edit your invoices. We have quite a bit of one of our chapters in QuickBooks Desktop, Mastering QuickBooks Desktop Level 1, all about reformatting your templates for invoices. And so it's pretty easy to do. You just open up your invoices, click formatting, and you can customize the data layout. The thing that's been missing is for payments. So historically, whenever you receive a payment from a customer, you open up the customer payment window, you fill out the customer payment, and if you wanted to print this out or email the receipt to the customer, you could click on print or email up here at the top, and you would get a pretty standard Intuit receipt. There really wasn't any way for you to put your logo onto it or to change what was or was not shown on that receipt. But things have changed. With 2021, that capability has been added. So you go up to formatting, and this is where you'll see the different templates that are available. By default, there's only the one. This is the standard one that QuickBooks has had for years and years and years. But you do have the option over here, finally, to customize the data layout. So you can click that, make a copy, and you'll see that this window is very similar to the customization options for sales, receipts, invoices, statements, things like that. This is where we can choose all of the different pieces of information that are included on this payment receipt. So if you want to take any of these off, you absolutely can. You can also change how QuickBooks refers to any of those. So these are the titles that will appear on the actual receipt that you send off to the client. Go over here to columns. This is where you can change whether or not they get included on that receipt at all, along with where they appear in terms of their order right here. You can also choose the printing options, just like you would from any of the other templates. And coolest thing is that you can go to layout design. And just like the layout designer on invoices and sales receipts, you can edit this to include your company's logo. You can move around the boxes. These are things that really haven't ever been able to be done before. So in fact, it looks like in this case, we might want to move this box down a little bit and shift some of these things over so they fit into that little envelope right there. But that's about it. It's a pretty simple added feature, but it's definitely cool and definitely a helpful thing to finally be able to update those and customize them. The next thing I want to show is the improved PDF and attachment preview whenever you're emailing an invoice. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and I'm actually going to open up a different company file really quick. I'm going to close this company. And I've got a different company cooked up. This company doesn't really have a lot of transactions in it, the one that I'm going to open here, but at least it does have an invoice that I can show you why this is an improvement and what it does. I'm going to open up Jaime's Construction Company. Now this one is a bit of a time saver because I'm going to go ahead and close all of this. Okay, let's open up Create Invoices. I'm going to go look over at an invoice. So let's just look at this invoice and see what QuickBooks does if we try to email this. Click on Email. Okay. So now in 2021, what happens is over here on the right-hand side, you get a preview of the PDF. And notice that it's showing me that preview on the PDF because that's the attachment that I actually have selected right here. Get a nice preview over here. You can zoom in. You can scroll around, right? Zoom out. You can also download this or print it directly from this screen. And what's even better is if you want to attach a different PDF, like maybe you also want to attach a customer statement to the invoice, or maybe you have some pictures of receipts of billable expenses that you're charging a customer for, or a timesheet from a vendor, or from listing the time that somebody in your company has worked. We just add that in, and of course we've always been able to do that, but now notice that we see the statement over here in the preview instead of the invoice. I click on my invoice, it takes me to my invoice, and I click on my statement, and then it takes me to my statement. So whatever you select over here in the attachment section is what appears over here on the right-hand side. So instead of having to open up each one of those different PDFs to see, oh, did that get included, or did this thing go onto the PDF, or did I attach the wrong PDF? Now you can just click on them and you can check. And it's right there for you. So nice little quality of life improvement. Obviously not earth-shattering, but definitely helpful. Oh, looks like Melissa wrote, I love it. Okay, so maybe it is earth-shattering for Melissa. So that's good. Yeah, it's a really nice quality of life improvement, and yeah, it's a nice little time saver. So there you go. So I'm going to close that. So that was fast. You know, not a whole lot to talk about there, but it kind of explains itself. You know, you take a look at it and it's like, oh yeah, that's way better than what it used to be. Next big one. So I'm already in this company file, Jaime's construction company. This is the one that I have attached to my phone. So I'm going to see if this works. So I've downloaded the mobile app onto my phone, and I've already added a couple of transactions through my phone, just in case this doesn't work. And it does take a little bit of time for it to process. So it's sort of like one of those cooking shows where, you know, they cook the cake or whatever it is, and then, you know, once they're done with the recipe, they open up the oven and, oh, there's one that's already in there. I did something similar with some transactions that I added through my phone. We're going to look at those, but I also want to see if I can share just my phone with you. So let's see here. I'm going to try to connect it. Bear with me for one moment. Okay. I managed to do it. Cool. All right, everybody. So what you're seeing right now is my phone. And I can move, you know, back and forth right there. Isn't that neat? So we've got my phone on here. And what you'll notice is that I have an icon, and it kind of cuts it off. It just calls it QuickBooks. But this is a new app. You can download it onto your phones and your tablets. And it's called, let me go ahead and open it up. It's called well, I don't know if it's going to show me the title of it. Here, hold on. Let me go and search for the title of it, because you'll have to search for it in Google Play or the Apple App Store. So let's see. I think it's just called the QuickBooks Desktop app. Just make sure here. Yes. So if you go to the Apple App Store or Google Play, if you search for QuickBooks Desktop, you'll see it there. It's called the QuickBooks Desktop app. Now, the point to this, and the only thing that we can really use it for right now, is to take pictures of receipts. But to be honest, that might be enough by itself to get you to upgrade to 2021, because this is a pretty big deal. In the past, you've always had to keep pictures of receipts separate, or to keep the receipts themselves, scan them in through some separate program, some separate, you know, like a scanner or a printer, right, in your office. Now, all you have to do is open up this app and then press on Snap Receipt down at the very bottom. Whenever you first start using it, it's going to ask you for your Intuit username and password, and it's going to use that information to figure out which company files you use. Now, the only drawback that I've found to this, and it is kind of a big drawback for some people, is that it does not let you take pictures for multiple company files. So once you've logged into it, you've told the app which company file you're going to be, you know, taking pictures for. That's it. It's not going to let you switch between company files. So for those of you who have multiple company files, this is a little bit less useful. But for those of you who are just entering transactions for a single company, it's pretty cool. Now, I've got a pretty rudimentary receipt. I wanted to print it out, but we didn't have a whole lot. We've unconnected. We disconnected our printer, so I couldn't print one out. So I'm going to go ahead and try to do this. I'm going to tap on snap receipt. Okay, and so there's a receipt. Oh, there we go. So again, pretty rudimentary. I just wrote this down. Bob's Burger Joint. I put the date on there, the dollar amount. We're going to use this photo. And by the way, it did that for me automatically. I didn't have to press any buttons. It just captured it. I'm going to call this, let's say, food receipt. Now, the nice thing about this is, and I think that maybe this is a problem that I encounter, other people don't. Whenever I go out and buy something, if it's for a client or for a job, and then a week later or a couple of days later, I'm looking at the receipts, to be honest with you, it's hard for me to remember who I bought it for and what the receipt was even for in some cases. And what's nice about this is that because this is in the moment and you're able to take a picture of your receipt as you get it, it's very fresh in your mind. So for the memo, you're going to know what that is right away. You're going to say bought lunch on way to Austin client. That way I'll know which client or which customer or which job I want to apply this expense to later on, whenever I eventually add it into QuickBooks. Now I'm going to upload this, and that's done. It's going to upload the picture of the receipt and all of my notes. It's going to go into QuickBooks. And by the way, you can do this with multiple receipts. You know, if you want to pop out your app like this, if you've got 10 receipts and you just want to take pictures of them all with your phone, you absolutely can. What's cool is you can also look at your history through your phone. So if you tap on that view history down at the very bottom, this is going to show you a listing of all the different things that have been added. So you can see I've added a couple of things in here. We're going to look at a few of them too, just so you can see where they go once you add them into QuickBooks. So I'm going to close this app. I'm glad that worked. Let me stop my screen mirroring here. Go. Now, the big question is, where do they go once we actually, upload them to the cloud? Well, let's go check it out. I'm going to go over to vendors and then down to receipt management. So this is where all the receipts get downloaded to, and it does take a little bit of time for them to get processed. It takes about 10 minutes or so for each receipt to get processed, which, is not that big of a deal, especially if we're dealing with transactions that, happen outside of the office, and we really don't expect to work with them until we get back to the office, or if somebody at the office is going to take care of for us. This is where you can see all the transactions that have been sent over. And what's important to note here is that these are for review, which means that the desktop company has them. It has the pictures. It has the data about it. Notice that QuickBooks looks for the vendor. It can read these receipts. Look for the vendor. It'll also look for the account number. So if it's got the part of the bank account number or debit card number or something like that that's listed on there, QuickBooks is going to try to link that to the right bank account on your chart of accounts too. It'll look for the date. It'll look for the dollar amount. And based upon past transactions, it'll also try to assign an expense account for you. But obviously, QuickBooks isn't always going to know what all of these transactions are for. All it has is a receipt to go on, but at least it fills in some of the details for you. Now, filling in the details is pretty easy. For one thing, if the transaction has already been recorded, so if somebody went in and opened up the right checks window and entered all the details for this $102.66 transaction, you'll see a match on here. It'll list the match right there, and you can click match and match it up with the existing transaction so that it doesn't get counted twice. But if you haven't done that, and you probably haven't, because the whole point behind this is to be able to snap pictures of receipts and enter them really quickly and have it be automated, right? So you don't have to enter those manually. But if you did, it's still got you covered. But chances are the way most people are going to use this is over here on the right-hand side, click the drop-down arrow and then choose Review. Now, if you've got doubles, you can always delete them. So if you take a picture twice and one of them doesn't turn out very well, you can click the drop-down arrow here, delete it. Notice these are for the same thing. So we'll delete it, and that's not a problem. It'll just take that one away, and we won't have to deal with it anymore. It won't affect our account balances because, again, these are for review. So they're not actually affecting any of our account balances anyway. Now, this transaction that I'm looking at right now, this rebar deposit. So or rebar depot, I should say. I'm going to click this drop down arrow and click Review. This is where we see all of the information that came over from the app. So there's a picture of the receipt. Again, QuickBooks is going to try to put in the bank or credit card. It's not always going to get it right, but you can absolutely put that in there. You can put in the check number if this is a check that you took a picture of, and you can take pictures of checks and do it that way. The date. Again, QuickBooks is going to try to find that. If it doesn't, you can enter it instead. It looks for the amount. It does a pretty good job of doing that. It picked out the total amount. It didn't include the other amounts. You can assign a class, and then here you've got the vendor. Now, if the vendor already exists, it'll try to pick it off of the list. If it doesn't, it'll ask you to add it. And what's cool is that right here, we've got that memo that I recorded. Well, we've got job right next to it. So this is where we pick out who this particular transaction was for. So this is for Austin's office. So we'll choose that as the job. That way we never forget what it's for. And this is for equipment. So I'm going to go ahead and put in, let's see, what do we have here for expenses? It's a little bit annoying because we don't see the type of account over here. And that can be a little bit confusing, to be honest with you, because I don't see that some of these are equity or assets. I know what they are just because, I'm used to these. I'm used to these chart of accounts, or these accounts in the chart of accounts. But there we go. So I'll choose construction material costs, and I'm going to save and add to the register. So it makes it very clear that when this is added, it's going to put it onto the register. And as it does that, the transaction, wasn't able to create it. Maybe that's because it's older. Let me see if I can add in a newer transaction. So we'll review. I might also be logged in as a person who can't enter transactions. So let's say operations account. Let's try this. Okay. Yeah, it could just be that I'm logged in as a bad user. So create the vendor. There we go. I think what happened is I entered that transaction a long time ago, this rebar depot. So I may have misplaced the receipt. So that's probably why it wouldn't let me record it. But in those cases, you'd take a picture of the receipt again and you can put it back in. Now, I also want to point out though that this window, it gets even better, because not only can you take pictures of receipts, but if you've scanned in a whole lot of receipts and you want to add in a whole bunch of them all at the same time, you absolutely can. Up here at the top left, I'll click Browse to Upload. And let's say I've got 20 receipts that I scanned in. I didn't bother to use the app. I just scanned them in with the printer, right? Or with the scanner on the printer. It's pretty common. I put them all into a folder. And now all I have to do is select them all. You could select 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Click Open. And what's going to happen is it's going to start processing those receipts. Notice that right now it's processing one receipt. Just popped up to 3. So those 2 that I just added, it's going to start processing those. So instead of me having to enter each one of those receipts individually by myself, going through the write checks window. Now they get entered right in here by themselves. Now, one thing I also want to point out is that in some cases, it could be that the transactions you're recording in here that have receipts, maybe you've already entered them through online banking, because it could be that you added those debit card transactions. That's fine, because if you enter those transactions through bank feeds, they'll show up here as a match, and QuickBooks will try to match the receipt against those downloaded transactions. And in that case, really what it does is it looks at that downloaded transaction and it just adds the picture of the receipt onto it, because the downloaded transaction already exists. Now you can always go back and check in on the transactions that were entered. So this is under the reviewed. This is that Bob's Burger joint transaction that I already added. It's got some details about it. It's got a match attached to the transaction. We can view it, and it brings up the write checks transaction for me, which I can see right here. Now you do have to be a little bit careful, because it does mark these things as billable. It could also mark these as printed later. So there's some quirks, and hopefully they're going to work these out over time. That's definitely some feedback that I've given into it. So you want to be mindful of that, but it does attach the file right there. So we're good on those. So that's the new mobile app. Pretty neat. Oh, got some questions in here. So Melissa wrote in, so when we do expense reports, can this be attached to our checks? Yes, it can. Because if you open up this window, the receipt management, if you've already entered the checks, what will happen is QuickBooks will just have a list of pictures. So it'll have all of these pictures of receipts that you've entered. And as long as the receipts are for the same dollar amount as the checks, you'll see the checks appear as matches. And that's where you match them. So yes, absolutely it will. As long as the dollar value that it reads is the same as the dollar value on the checks. Yep. But it works for checks too. And there we go. So and Melissa also wrote, can multiple receipts be used on one transaction, i.e. expense report checks with 4 or more receipts? That's interesting. I don't believe so. I'm trying to think of a workaround for that, because it is possible for us to have multiple bills, but I don't think that it's going to let you combine them and put multiple receipts onto the same transaction, because it's not as detailed as online banking. So like right here, we've got the review apps like you would expect from online banking, unfortunately. And we can't. I think it's going to be one-to-one. The only case where you would be able to do that is, and I don't think that even that would work, but you could potentially try to create multiple bills and then attach those receipts to the bills and then enter the bill payment as a check. And that would create a single check transaction, but multiple bills, and the receipts would be added to the bills. But that's all I can think of to make that work. Next, I want to show you the big feature that's been pushed out this year. And this big one is going to be for online banking. Now, the very first thing to point out here is that the new online banking feature, you do have to go into preferences and turn it on. So up here towards the top, if I choose the checking options and then company preferences, it's going to be down here towards the bottom. It says view and enter downloaded transactions using, and it's got advanced mode, express mode, classic mode. Now, classic mode is really old at this point. Classic mode, I think that they started phasing that out in, I want to say 2012 or so. And so the express mode was what they replaced it with, and it's being not phased out. You can still use it naturally. But if you want to instead use this new mode called advanced mode, you can go in here and you can change it. So you don't have to move to the new version. You can stick with the old one if you want to. You can even stick with the really old one if you want to. But for those of you who really want to take advantage of online banking, I got to tell you, this new system is pretty cool. I'm going to open up bank feeds here. Oh, whoops, this is the wrong company file. Let me close my companies and open up the right one. And just while this loads, I'm going to tell you that the idea behind the updating of bank feeds, a lot of it is coming from QuickBooks Online. And one of the things that people really like about QuickBooks Online is the downloading of transactions, both from bank accounts and credit cards. And that window for online banking, if you haven't seen it in QBO, is easier to navigate and easier to just pick up and use than the desktop version. So it really is influencing a lot of the design behind what's going into desktop now. We're going to go over into Bank Feed Center. Go. I've already turned it on. So this is the new Bank Feed Center. And I know the older version, whenever you open up the Bank Feed Center, there's like a list of bank accounts over on the left, and then options over on the right, and you have to look at a list of transactions. That's all gone now. Instead, it's just this window. And notice that up here at the top, you can choose between the different bank accounts and credit card accounts that are hooked up to online banking. So right now we're looking at our checking account, but I can switch over to savings if I needed to. Now, the checking account, we're going to see a couple of numbers. You might be familiar with these already. We've got the in QuickBooks balance versus this top balance, which is the bank balance. A little bit of confusion over what those two things are and why they might be different. It's actually normal for them to be different, because if you have any outstanding checks, they'll be affecting the in QuickBooks balance, because that's something that QuickBooks knows about, but the bank doesn't know about. And also, if you have any transactions down here that you haven't added into QuickBooks yet, that could be affecting the account balance, the bank balance, but it wouldn't be affecting the in QuickBooks balance yet because you haven't added it yet. And that's actually one of the things that I sort of compare this bottom section to, is everything you see down here at the bottom is sort of like these transactions are in the waiting room, right? They're sitting on the chairs in the waiting room, they're flipping through the magazines, and it's our jobs to tell them which rooms to go into. We're going to tell them where to go. And so as we tell them where to go, that's going to add them onto the registers. So anything you see right in here, it's not counting yet towards your bank balance or any of your financial statements or anything like that. But through your actions, you can make them affect those balances. Now we're going to say a couple of things here. First, whenever QuickBooks downloads transactions from the bank or the credit card, it puts them into different buckets. There's a bucket for recognized, which means that QuickBooks has downloaded a transaction from the bank or the credit card, looked through your history, your transaction history, and it found that you've already entered that downloaded transaction. This is important because by it looking at the dollar value of the transactions you enter and the dollar value of the downloaded transactions, it can determine whether or not it needs to match those two things together so that it doesn't get counted twice. Now, it relies on you in a lot of cases to do this right, because the dollar value of the downloaded transaction and the dollar value of the transaction you enter manually have to be identical. Otherwise, it's not going to recognize it, and it's going to pop up over here in unrecognized. But that's okay, because if we're dealing with debit card charges, credit card charges, if you're using online banking, you probably don't need to record them manually at all anyway. You just download them directly from your bank or from your credit card, and they'll pop into unrecognized, which are all the transactions that have been downloaded that you haven't entered yet. Most of the time, what you're going to see under recognized are going to be checks, things that you've already recorded in QuickBooks because naturally you had to in order to print out the check. You could also see in here payments from customers, because QuickBooks can look at the dollar value of the payment and link it to the invoice that's open. It could also be that you see in here bill payments. So if you download the payment for a bill and you've already entered that bill in QuickBooks as a bill, QuickBooks, whenever it looks at that bill payment that comes in from banking, looks through your bills, it'll try to match up the bill payment with the bill. So that's what Recognize is all about. Transactions that QuickBooks knows how to deal with. Another thing that it knows how to deal with, though, are not necessarily transactions that are matched, though most of these are, but also transactions that have a rule applied to them. And essentially what rules are is a way for you to program QuickBooks so that whenever transactions get downloaded from the bank or the credit card, QuickBooks looks at certain identifying features of these transactions and it applies rules to them, whether that be, assigning an account to them or assigning a memo to them, something like that. That way, it knows what to do with them. So that's why it calls them recognized. Now, these are really easy to enter. Notice that they're already checked off. If they're all right, and they usually will be, you can click this drop-down arrow and then choose Add Confirm. But if it gets something wrong, notice that over here on the right-hand side, there is also an option for not a match. So if it matches something up to the wrong thing, you can choose not a match. And this transaction will instead go over into unrecognized, and we can deal with it over there. That's not going to happen very often, though. And if you've got two customer payments that are the same amount, it could be that QuickBooks tries to apply it to the wrong invoice. That's one of the most common situations that's going to happen. Or if you have multiple checks that are for the same dollar amount and you've downloaded them all and you've got open bills for the same dollar amount or the same checks for the dollar amount, you can see them in here getting matched up against the wrong ones. QuickBooks is still going to try to get it right. It's still going to go by date, dollar amount. It's going to look at the payee, everything it can to get it matched up right. But in some cases, it's an AI, so it's going to make those mistakes, right? But you can still correct them. So you still have the power to do that. Instead of doing it in a batch, you can also click Confirm. That confirms the fact that it matched up correctly. That works just fine. And in this case, we're not really confirming, we're just adding it because this is a new transaction. That's really important to note because these transactions that we're looking at up here, these top 4, we've already recorded those, right? QuickBooks looks through our history. These are all checks. We're essentially downloading the bank's record of these checks. So when I confirm them, it's not really changing our account balances because the check is already there. It's just clearing it off of this list, telling QuickBooks, yes, this really did happen. What's nice about this, by the way, and you might think, well, that just seems like extra work. If the check is already there, why am I going in here and confirming all these things? But the big advantages of this is that if you confirm these, whenever you go to reconcile later on, anything you've confirmed will show up as what's called pre-reconciled. That means that in the reconciliation window, it's already going to have that checkbox checked off for it. So that's a big time saver, definitely helpful. Now this one with the rule applied to it, this is a different thing. So this is add. That means that it's going to add that onto the register. So that will actually affect account balance because that doesn't exist on the register yet. But maybe QuickBooks just missed it and you have already recorded this transaction. It thinks you haven't. That's okay. You can click Match to an existing transaction. Also note that when we're looking at this line here, there's information that can be edited. So I clicked in the payee right there. If it gets the payee wrong, you can click that drop-down arrow and change it. If it gets the memo wrong, we can click that arrow and change it. We've got the expense account right here. We can change that too. Or if you want to assign multiple expense accounts, or like a liability account and an expense account for the payment of a loan, we can click this drop down arrow and choose instead, add more details. And this is where you can add different lines. So we've got the date, the memo, number, the payee, and then this is where we can add in those details. Notice that we also have customer job on here, whether it's, so I can add a line and we'll say that, you know, $150 of this is for tools and miscellaneous equipment, and that's right. I can assign this to a customer or job, and then I can click this drop down arrow and say that the rest of this is for equipment rental. There we go, equipment rental, and maybe it's for a different job. That's perfectly fine. We can add that in. Put in different memos, billable, class, amount. So I'm going to go ahead and put in $50 right there to add the split. Perfect. Now we'll just save and add to register. It's an old transaction, so I get this warning. There we go. That added it in with all of my details. Now, as you add these in, as you confirm them, it's very clear to understand where QuickBooks is going with them. So if I click add to register, this is where I'm going to see that list of transactions that I've added in. Pretty cool for us to see them all on here. Now, what about the transactions that QuickBooks downloads and doesn't know what to do with right away? Well, I'm going to click on uncategorized, and this is where QuickBooks keeps all of these. Now, first of all, in the past, these windows have not necessarily been the easiest to work with. And I know that sometimes you'll have lots of transactions from the same vendor. They'll all be listed together, or at least you'll make them be listed together because you can sort them by payee or bank memo. And it might be that you want to apply the same expense account to lots of them at the same time. It's always been a pain because you have to click on each individual one and assign an account, and then assign an account, and then assign an account, even though it's from the same people. But here's a cool thing, and I only have 4 transactions on here, so it's not going to be as impressive. But you have to imagine, you know, you've got 50 or 60. Let's say I want to select the range. First, I'm going to click a checkbox up there for the top left, and you can scroll down, and I want to select everything within a range. What I'll do is I'll select on my keyboard the Shift button, and then press the check mark. And it selects everything between those two check boxes. So if I select this one and then that one, it chooses everything, right? And you can imagine that that's going to save a lot of time if you've got a lot of transactions to deal with. You don't have to check off each individual one, especially if it's hundreds or thousands. Now, also historically, you have not been able to add in multiple transactions at the same time and also assign an account to them, because you have to, again, click on each individual account field. Ugh, it really is actually a pain. It takes a lot of time, and it's not fun. But let's say I want to apply the same account to all these, the same expense account, same income account. I can select them all or select the range, click batch actions, modify. And hold on, where is it? It's weird. Why is that not working? So to perform batch actions, ensure you select transactions that are either, oh, I see, that's why. Okay, so I have to select either all payments or all deposits. That makes perfect sense, actually. So I'm going to select modify. I was wondering why that didn't work. So now instead of having to do it transaction by transaction, transactions from the same payee, from the same customer, you can have QuickBooks automatically apply the payee to multiple of them, and you can also choose the same expense account or the same cost of goods sold account. So you can see how that can save you a lot of time. Same thing for class, right? So having to do it one by one takes a lot of time, but now you can do it for multiple at the same time. You just have to check off the box and then put in your options. Now you can also click in any one of these fields, change action basis. Now, this window is a little bit tricky when it comes to choosing existing transactions. QuickBooks is very good at recognizing transactions that you've already entered as long as the dollar values are the same. The problem comes up though, that sometimes whenever you make a deposit at the bank, it's actually made up of multiple payments from multiple customers, right? And so whenever you download deposits, they'll probably show up here as unrecognized. There'll be a deposit of a certain dollar amount, like this one for $775. And QuickBooks might even expect for you to put in an income account, or you might put it in, right? But it could be that this transaction is actually for two different payments, one for $500 and one for $275.80. Now, in the past, the way that that's always been solved is to use undeposited funds. You go into receive payments, you enter a payment for $500 and then another payment for $275.80, and then you record a deposit. That way you've got a deposit for the same amount as the one that you download. And that process still works. If you've been doing that, that's perfectly fine. You'll see the transaction downloaded right over here as recognized, and you can confirm it and you'll be good. But something that you can also do is if you have open invoices for customers and you never record their payment at all, you can match those deposits against multiple customers' open invoices. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up this, and I'm going to enter I'm going to enter an invoice. So let's say we invoiced Natalie Chapman for some design. I'll just say $500. I will save that. And then we also invoiced Benjamin Checkness. So I'll create an invoice here for them. I'll put in gardening, $275.80. Right, perfect. So I've entered two invoices. I have not received the payment at all. Haven't entered it. Don't need to. I open up this window and here's this deposit of $775.80. And you have to imagine being in a situation where you've already issued these invoices to a customer. You see the deposit come in. You know that this is for two customers. We can't put two customers on here. There's no way for us to put two payees, two accounts. We can't indicate the invoices. So what you do is you click the drop down over here and select match to existing transactions. And from this window, you'll see the open invoices. So if we want to apply this to these open invoices right here, we just check off both of them. And we're going to combine that deposit so that it applies it to these two invoices. Works great, especially if the total is exactly the same as those invoices. We can save and add it to the register. QuickBooks will apply this deposit to both of those customers. It'll actually create payments for those customers. This works great as long as you don't enter the customer payments ahead of time. If you go in and you enter those payments to undeposited funds, you won't see the open invoices in here. It actually is a little bit difficult to work with in those cases. Now, what if there's a difference between what you download as the deposit and what you invoice your clients? Because in some cases, there'll be something taken out for processing fees and things like that. So I'm going to go over here and edit one of these invoices. Let's say that this invoice was for $300. And so whenever we receive that deposit, it's for less money than what we have as a total for those invoices. That's usually how this is going to work. So I click this drop down arrow, I choose match to existing transactions. I check off those two transactions, and here it tells me that there's a difference between these invoices and what we actually received. Well, that's because there were $24.20 taken out for merchant services fees. So what do I do? Well, click resolve. And this is where we can enter a line summarizing those merchant services fees. So I can put in whoever you're using for processing, you'll probably have a merchant services fees expense account. Though this could also be for income or something like that, if you've made an extra deposit or there's like a refund from a vendor came in, so you need to apply that to it. And we'll put in negative 2420. Perfect. So now we've got those two transactions for 800 minus the $24.20. So we get to $775.80 total. And now I'm going to go ahead and save and add to register. There we go. QuickBooks added that in. And it's going to close both of those invoices and create a separate transaction for the merchant services fees. We can see customers don't have any balances, and we're good on that. So I'm going to go ahead and go back in here, and throughout this process, it's still easy for us to go in here and see what's been added to the register and in which situations. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. So we got a question from Melissa and James. So Melissa wrote, do they have to be authorized users within QuickBooks? Oh, to add in transactions through the mobile app? So yes, they do. Because what you have to do is you have to set them up as a user ahead of time. Otherwise, whenever they log in through the mobile app, they're not going to have a company file to choose from. Basically, they set up an account. Once you set up a user for somebody, they set up a QuickBooks account, and that'll link them with that company file. And then from that point forward, they can log into it through their mobile app. We also let's see. We got a question in from also from Melissa, who wrote, how does QuickBooks know which invoice was merchant services? Well, it doesn't need to, because the invoices are for income. And so the invoices actually don't need to be changed. And that's kind of the point, as a matter of fact, because the income from the customer still gets recorded based upon what's on the invoice. The important thing is the deposit, because the expenses actually come out of the deposit, not the payment, because the payment was for the full amount. The customer paid $300. So the invoice doesn't need to be changed. The payment doesn't need to be changed. The only thing that QuickBooks has to do is alter that deposit amount, which is what it does. And historically, this is done in the same way. So if I click on record deposits and I select payments, click OK. If I were to do this manually, what I would do is I would put in merchant services right here. I would put in merchant services fees, and then I would enter a negative. So you see, I'm not actually altering the invoice at all. The invoices, the customer payments are still for the same amounts. We don't want to alter those. We're just going to add in the merchant services fees at the very bottom, because that comes out of the net of that deposit. So, well, the only way that you could apply it to a particular customer is you would have to record it manually. You would add it onto the invoice. So you would actually edit the invoice. So if you go over to the invoice, you could potentially, and you could put another in, which would be a negative amount, and then save it. So you could do that. But outside of that, it's not. There's unfortunately, I didn't see a customer job field in that window that I was looking at. So whenever I go over to the bank feed center, let me go check it out. So we're going to edit this, match to existing transactions. So resolve. Yeah, see, there's no place in here for me to put a customer job. Now, what you could do is after that transaction is entered, it could be possible for you to edit the transaction that QuickBooks creates. So if I opened up, say, that payment, that I just recorded. There we go. Where is it? Is that the invoice? Go to history. Go to that. That's the payment. Go to, oh no, that one was the one in undeposited funds. Let's see. Yeah, because you're going to have to edit the deposit because that's where the expense is at. So let's see right here. Trying to find the deposit. There's no way for it to have done it any other way. Payment. The invoice. Where did that deposit go? I'll just look it up on the chart of accounts. Let's go look at our register. Okay, that's pretty easy for us to track down. Oh, interesting. It's actually not that at current date. Weird. I actually can't find it on here. I was going to show you how to edit the deposit. Yeah, I can't find the deposit that it makes. But you would have to edit the deposit that QuickBooks creates in order to add that on. Or you can edit the invoice. Because I put it into the bank account. The payments that I was looking at from undeposited funds earlier were some tests that I was performing. So those are separate. Yeah. And you actually can point them to a customer on the payments on the deposit window. So in here, if you put in received from, if you put the customer on there, and then you put in the from account as an expense account, and you put in the amount, it will alter the job costing reports. So you can just put in the customer name as received from, and then the expense account, and then the amount is the negative. That'll alter your job costing reports. Or you can edit the invoice. Either way works. Let's see. Or you could actually, another way you could do it is you could enter a credit memo. So that might be interesting. And James wrote, can electronic bank payments be created using the new online banking center application? They can. I'm not able to do it through mine because I just don't have, I'm using a sample data file, but yes, you can. You'll still go through the same route of opening up the write checks window, and there'll be a checkbox there for you to go through the process of entering it. That'll also vary by bank though, because some banks don't let you do that. But yeah, it's available for you. Also, if any of you are already familiar with bank feeds, you probably also know that you can select transactions and you can ignore them. So that's still there. And of course, if you're looking for something very simple to enter, you can click in the account field. You can click in the payee field, and you can add them line by line too. Cool. So that's bank feeds. Rules really haven't changed at all. You still have a rules list. They're still filled out in the same way. This is where you can fill out the parameters of downloaded transactions and then apply what you want to eventually go onto them. Now, the last big feature that I want to touch on is, and let me see if I can get into the right, I actually think that was the right company. Let me open that up again. So this is for enterprise only, this feature I'm about to show you. And this feature is pretty cool, especially if you have customers or donors that you want to be split out into different groups. And the groups are totally arbitrary. Same thing for vendors. If you have customers that are in a particular region and you want to treat them differently somehow, or if you want, a different set of people to be able to come into contact with them or see their balances or see their transactions, that's what this next feature is for. Basically, it's a way for you to create groups of customers and vendors and then set up who it is who can interact with them. So the first step is to select lists and then manage groups. And you can set up groups of customers or vendors. Now, the example that I'm going to give is one where we have regional sales reps, and we only want people who are sales reps for the West Coast to be able to see and interact with customers on the West Coast, versus people who are in the Southwest, right? We have a different sales rep for the Southwest. So in those cases, we would create a customer group for the West Coast and the Southwest and any other groups that we wanted. So I'm going to go ahead and create a customer group. Let's just say West Coast customers. Click next. Now, again, very similar to what we saw earlier with those automated statements, right? We're essentially picking a parameter that we want QuickBooks to look for in our company file. So essentially, you choose what it is that you want QuickBooks to look for. It could be as easy as sales rep. So if you just want to have a customer group for each individual sales rep, you can absolutely do it. What's cool is that these groups, again, get updated over time automatically by QuickBooks as you add in sales reps to different customers or take them away for certain customers. So I'm going to say that because we're setting up customers who are on the West Coast here, we'll say that state is the field that we want QuickBooks to look for, equals. And if it's on the West Coast, we'd probably want QuickBooks to put in California. We'll want Oregon, and we'll also put in Washington. There we go. So now it's going to look for any customer that has California, Oregon, or Washington. I click next, and here's a list of those customers. Not only that, but as we add in more customers, it'll automatically add them in based upon whether they're in California, Oregon, or Washington. I click on finish. There we go. I've got my first customer group set up. I'm going to set up another one. I'm going to say Southwest customers. So we'll click next. And for this one, we're also going to put in state. And we're going to put in equals. And for this, we're going to put in Arizona. We'll put in Nevada. So we'll go look for Nevada right here. There we go. We'll put in New Mexico. Oh, that's handy. It's right next to it. And I'll also put in Texas. Why not? Sort of in the middle south, but part of it is definitely southwest. And Colorado is pretty close. So I'll also put in Colorado. There we go. We'll add that in. Click next. And so we don't really have a whole lot of customers to go in there, but at least we get a few. Click finish. And so there we've got our two different groups set up. Now, there are a couple of things we can do here. For one, we can send out an email to everybody within a group. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty great way of lumping customers together or vendors together. Want to send them all an email at the same time with a special offer or a thank you or something like that, discount codes, that sort of thing. You can absolutely do that. But the main reason why this exists is so that we can then go on to create users and roles that can only one customer group. Same thing for vendors. Vendors work out the same way, by the way. So I'm going to close all of that and let me show you this. Now, some of you may have actually never seen this because you don't use Enterprise, but Enterprise sets up its users a little bit differently than Pro and Premier. If we go to Company Users, Set Up Users and Roles, you'll notice that this window it's a tad different because instead of setting up each individual, you set up what are called roles. And you define permissions at the role level. And then whenever you set up a user, you assign a role to them. And the role determines what it is that they can and cannot see and do. Now, for us, we're going to edit this sales rep role. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and duplicate this. And I'm going to call this role the West Coast sales rep. I want them to do what a normal sales rep would do, but only interact with those West Coast customers. So I'm going to edit this. This is my new role. And again, if you've never seen Enterprise before, it's kind of staggering all of the things that you can do with this window, because just to show you how specific we can get, whenever I click open reports, we can select on a report by report basis which reports our users get. So if I click on, say, sales, it then shows me what they can do with those reports. But I can choose for them to not see inventory reports, not see banking reports, because they don't need to see those. They have access to, and whether or not they can add, edit, and delete things from those lists. We have customers and receivables, what it is they can do here. A full circle means that they can do everything for that particular transaction, like invoices, whereas credit memos, they can't do anything, but we can change it over here. So you can get really specific in Enterprise. But this setting, the one that we're talking about right now with customer groups, vendor groups, it's going to be under centers. Now for this West Coast sales rep, we only want them to have access to the West Coast customers. So I'm going to select the customers there. And this is actually where it gets a little bit tough, because without taking this webinar, if you wanted to use this feature, it might actually be tough for you to even figure out where to go to turn this on, because it's kind of buried. It doesn't even mention customer groups. So I'm going to select Customer Center. And then down here at the bottom right, notice that it says Custom, Define Record Level Access. So we'll select Yes, and then Define. And this is where we tell QuickBooks who it is that that particular role can interact with. So we've got our West Coast sales rep. I want them to only work with West Coast customers so they can view, modify, print, and view balances. I don't want them to be able to delete them. And then we click OK. And now anybody I set up with that access level can only look at those West Coast customers. I set up a new one for Southwest sales rep. We'll go down here and I'll select Customer Center, Custom, Define, and now I'll just give them access to the Southwest customer. Click OK. Very good. So now we've got our two roles. Now from this point forward, I can set up users. So I click New. Let's say we got a new customer or a new sales rep, Trevor. Choose him from this list, click Add. And so now he has that assigned role. The only customers he can interact with from this point forward are on the West Coast. And that's it. Anybody I add to that group, he automatically has access. Okay. And then from that point forward, Trevor Matheson can log in, and those are the only ones that he can work with. He can't work with the other groups. So, and again, this works both for customers and also for vendors. So with vendors, what it would probably be is purchasers. So people who work with specific vendors for the purchase of, very specific parts or in certain regions. So that's available too. The only difference there is that whenever you go over to the role list and you edit it, instead of looking at, because naturally this is under the centers, like we were looking at earlier, instead of going to the customer center, you go to the vendor center instead. And that's where you would pick out the vendor group. So it works either way. So pretty cool feature. Actually, it's a very cool feature. Because I just gave you one example of how to use this, right? I mean, you look at the ways that you can break up customers, and it's pretty staggering because we were sort of theory crafting all the different ways that you could break this up. Customer type is totally arbitrary. You can have, if it's a construction company, you can have residential type, commercial type, government type. And if you only want a particular sales rep to see one group of them, or somebody within the company to see one group of them, you can do it. You can assign sales rep, and these are things that have already been assigned to the customer. We don't have to go in and add these things to the customer. QuickBooks just looks for them, and it looks for that value. If you've got customers that are within a certain, this is pretty big, certain sales tax code or item, right? That's another parameter that you can set up. So you can get really specific, and I'm pretty excited about where this particular feature is going. Melissa seems excited about this one. This is awesome. Very good. And Melissa also wrote, can we separate vendors by 1099 forms necessary? That's a good question. I don't think so. I mean, you kind of can at the 1099 level, because as you create the 1099s, you can choose, which lines on the 1099 to include. So, and we haven't actually seen how QuickBooks is going to do this with the new 1099 NEC. We'll see how that works out. But so as I select this, so we've got vendor type, and what you could do is you could actually create different vendor types for the ones that have the different 1099 forms. You could do that. You can create lists based upon their 1099 eligibility. So if somebody is eligible, you can create a vendor group for that versus a vendor group for ones that aren't eligible. That could be a thing. But I think your best bet there is going to be the vendor type. So you'd create a type of vendor for a particular type of 1099, and then essentially you would choose it from this list. So that could actually be done. Right, MISC versus NEC, exactly. Eligibility, yeah. The eligibility doesn't tell you which type exactly. But what you would do is you would create a vendor type for NEC, and you would create a vendor type for MISC. And then you would assign those vendor types to the vendors. And once you've done that, you'd see it from this drop-down list, and you could choose it. So you could actually do this, yeah. You're very excited about that one, Melissa. That's cool. Melissa wrote, yes, 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 awesome. There you go. Yeah, that would absolutely do it. Now, there are a couple of little tweaks that have been made to advanced inventory. Now, I don't have access to advanced inventory in this company file, but I want to highlight a couple of them just so you see that they exist. These tweaks are not anything that really I could demonstrate all that much anyway, because a lot of them are just things that get toggled on or toggled off, but they're still important toggles. So one thing that is good, I do have screenshots of these, by the way, so I'll show you the screenshots. So if you're using barcodes, if you're using advanced inventory and barcodes, it is now possible for you to put in the prices on the barcode labels. So if you select File, Print Forms Labels, there's a section on here for item barcodes. And in the item barcodes, you can have it include the price on the barcode. So that gets printed onto the barcode. So that's a nice little addition if you're using advanced inventory. It's good to point out. I don't have advanced inventory for 2021. I only have it for 2020. So I wasn't able to open this up and demonstrate it, but that exists. And there's also the option for you in the advanced inventory window, whenever you go into edit preferences, you open up the advanced inventory preferences, there is a place now where you can go into serial lot numbers, and you can make it required for serial or lot number so or on all transactions, even assembly transactions. So that's available. This is something for those of you who use landed costs to calculate the overall price of inventory, both shipping, insurance, all those things that would normally be grouped together. There is now a remove landed cost button on the bill, so you can now take those away even after they've been applied. So those are, little tweaks here and there. I didn't spend a whole lot of time on them, honestly, because I don't have access to those features, but not a lot of folks in VIP use advanced inventory, but they're pretty straightforward too, these new features for advanced inventory. And that kind of brings me to the end of the webinar, but I feel like it's been pretty jam-packed. We've been in here for an hour and a half talking about new features. And yeah, I didn't expect for the webinar to go on for that long, but here we are. I have one last question from James wrote in, end of presentation question. Did you encounter any serious software issues or bugs that would suggest waiting a 21 version? I did not. And I will tell you that they have made a couple of changes over the course of 2021 already. It's been patched a few times, but the patches haven't been bugs. The patches have been improvements on the features. So like, for instance, just to give you a better explanation, was first pushed out, it originally didn't have the option for QuickBooks to automatically update the lists based upon changes that you make. So like, notice right here, notice right here on this window, it has updates automatic. It wasn't in at release. So it has improved. Version is actually already on its 4th version. And just to give you a little bit of insight into how Intuit develops these versions of QuickBooks, usually what happens is as the first one is actually the 3rd release, because internally Intuit works on several releases before they actually go to the public. So there's R1, R2, and then R3 is the one that people eventually get. So they actually go and then after a month or two, you'll usually get an R4 release, which is what I think it just came out. Actually, that's what postponed this class, is I wanted to do it after the R4 release. I was happy I did it because it made this window better. But that's typically how things go. Going to be bugs, you're going to things that are wrong, but I haven't noticed anything, and that's pretty phenomenal. I remember the worst bug that I've seen, where it was impossible to email customers their invoices. That was pretty bad. They fixed that in about 2 or 3 weeks. I remember, oof, that was a bad one. Nothing like that. I've kicked the tires on this thing pretty well, and haven't noticed anything that awful. So hopefully that helps you out, James. But also, I will say, if you buy 2021 and if you install it, even if you decide that there are bugs and you don't like it, you can keep 2020 installed on your computer, and you can open up the company file with 2020 again. It'll just make it so that you don't have access to the 2021 features. So you can always go back, but I haven't noticed anything. I don't see any more questions, and looks like several people have already left, which is fine because we went over time. But hopefully this class was helpful. and help to educate you on whether or not it's, you know, a good thing to buy. It's always a big investment buying a new version of QuickBooks. If it looks worth it to you, you know, that's great. It makes your life a little bit easier. If it's not, wait for the next year, and we'll have another webinar then, and you can check that out too. So thanks everybody for coming. Hopefully you'll join us for more webinars in the future, and happy QuickBooks Day. Have a great day.